Happy Saturday, friends. Josh's Severe Weather. I'm a meteorologist in Raleigh, and we're going to talk about the tropics here and the weather coming up for the next week in the U.S. And very quickly this morning, we went from nothing in the Caribbean to now two tropical storms, one of which I think will be a hurricane very soon. Nadine and Oscar, N and O here, as things have very quickly turned around here in just a matter of a few minutes to hours. So things are still cooking in the tropics, and not a surprise to somebody like me as a meteorologist due to the fact that water temperatures have been running higher than ever recorded. And we are heading into a La Nina, and both of those, despite what statistics may show, can keep the season kicking a little bit longer. So we're definitely not done just yet. Albeit the Gulf of Mexico right now does not have a threat over the next couple of weeks. In November, we're going to have to maybe still keep an eye on things a little bit longer than what we might be used to. But right now, no threats to Florida or to the southeastern United States. So thank you for joining me today. Oscar is overachieving. Aircraft are in there now. I'm going to get to that in just a little bit, but I think we're going to have a hurricane here this afternoon. Nadine made landfall in Belize with 60-mile-per-hour and winds, and more of a rainmaker than a windmaker, but one that could cause some significant flooding as it heads inland. So I am going to get to both of those here in just a little bit. First, I want to talk about the weather in the United States. Beautiful across the central and eastern U.S., but we do have a storm in the southwest that could produce some tornadoes and heavy mountain snow, and another storm moving into the northwest later this weekend. The good news is that as that system in the southwest lifts north and east, it'll send warmer weather back into the Midwest and Great Lakes. We are going to warm up in the eastern United States. And dry weather for the most part continues, although some coastal showers across Florida where it will be windy and a little on the cool side, but enjoy it while you can. Certainly it's better than what we saw with Milton. And then we're going to see this system stretching quickly northeastward, and behind it a shot of some quick cold coming to the upper Midwest, to central Canada, and eventually eastern Canada next week. The west is going to warm right back up. We're going to see a cool down coming later next week in the northeast as a front drops south, but very little moisture with that, just some rain and maybe some higher elevation snow for Wednesday night into Thursday morning, and then that lifts out. And the weather next weekend looks like it should be pretty good across the eastern United States. So that's really all I got to talk about. It's not very exciting for a meteorologist, but we still have weather to talk about here. We do have the threat, though, for some hail, severe wind, and maybe a few isolated tornadoes across eastern New Mexico later today into tonight. You'll see we have the slight risk, 2 out of 5, including Roswell and across eastern portions of New Mexico, maybe getting close to Clovis and Hobbs and down to Carlsbad, and even sneaking into the far northern part of southwestern Texas. And tomorrow there will be additional severe weather. This could get a bump up in places like Roswell and Tucumcari here over eastern New Mexico while it's snowing in the higher elevations. Here's a look at what our models are showing as far as weather. We are going to see things getting a little bit feistier this afternoon around Roswell, as well as Alamogordo. You can see supercell type storms. There's a hail threat. There's a locally strong wind threat. And, you know, it's certainly not out of the question a couple of these produce some quick tornadoes. Take a look at 7 o'clock Mountain Time here this evening. Roswell, Carlsbad, all under the gun here with potential severe weather. And then that's going to lift away. And there may be another round right behind it later this evening. While most of us on the East Coast are sleeping, we could be dealing with a regional outbreak of severe weather overnight tonight. Things should quiet down. There will be some heavy rain out of this, maybe a flash flood threat in places like Clovis and Roswell overnight. And then that piece of energy lifts out, and additional storms fire up tomorrow around Interstate, I believe it's 25 here, east of Santa Fe, and to the east of Albuquerque as well, late in the day tomorrow. And additional waves of storms will eventually spread east. As this storm makes its way out of the Rockies, out of the plains of New Mexico, it should not be as robust by the time we get into Monday, but we could see some local severe weather in far northwest Texas and western Oklahoma, maybe even parts of western Kansas. So those of you who are watching from that area, I don't talk enough about you with all that's going on in the tropics, but I am going to be watching this for you. All right, let's talk tropics. 2 tropical storms now. Nadine made landfall a little while ago with winds of 60 miles per hour. It is probably weakening now, but the system is going to move inland into higher elevations, and flash flooding becomes the main threat with this. And we will see that over Belize today and Guatemala later today, and eventually over southeastern parts of Mexico. This system, by the way, may degenerate after it spends enough time over land tomorrow. But what's left of it heads into the Pacific and maybe tries to come back to life as a zombie storm in the eastern Pacific. At that point, it's moving away from land, but there are some models indicating it has the possibility of becoming a hurricane, and it'll be curious to see if they keep the name Nadine. We may have Hurricane Nadine in the Pacific here next week. The other system of concern is Oscar. The latest Hurricane Center forecast had it at 40 miles per hour, but planes are in there now, and I do believe it's quite a bit stronger right in the center. You can see a healthy-looking storm. It's going to be moving into the Turks and Caicos Islands here later in the day today. We're probably going to see tropical storm force winds in places like Cockburn Town here, and continuing tonight through the Turks and Caicos. And then tomorrow heading towards Great and Nagua, I believe it's called, Matthew Town included in that tropical storm warning. And then as we head into Sunday evening, this could threaten the east coast of Cuba as well, where we do have a tropical storm warning in place. Farther up the Cuban coast, right now a tropical storm watch for the central north coast of Cuba. That is, if this system continues on a westward track, it could bring tropical storm force wind. But the official forecast does turn this to the right as a cold front and trough swing in from the west. And those will bring stronger wind shear and will probably stop this storm from strengthening more. And you can see there's a weakening trend by Tuesday into Wednesday. However, the southeastern Bahamas will be on the dirty side of this, so we are going to have tropical storm conditions across many of these islands here over the next few days. Eventually, you'll want to watch this thing here in Bermuda. I don't think Jamaica is going to be dealing with this, though, because it is strengthening rather than continuing as a weak system into the Western Caribbean. It's likely turning away. So here's a look at the tropics today, and you can see how quickly things elevated here. Just a pretty good tropical storm here, and if this system had developed any sooner, I think it could have gotten a hurricane strength. So Nadine definitely overachieved, and you can see the center now moving into northeastern Belize, but we have tropical storm force winds all the way up to Cozumel and Cancun this afternoon. And then you can see very tiny Oscar is very quickly getting together. Despite the dry environment, the wind shear's been low, and it's in a pocket of very warm water, and this system is definitely all systems go, even though it's very small. Reminds me a little bit of what we saw with Milton here about a week and a half ago, albeit it's not in the same basin. Elsewhere, pretty quiet across the rest of the Atlantic. A trough here near Bermuda is producing some squally weather, but no tropical convection with it, just a lot of swirl and a lot of wind. But that is latched onto a frontal boundary which extends across South Florida and the Bahamas into the central Gulf of Mexico. And as a result, we are high and dry here across much of the east. Here's our next system in the Four Corners region. That is going to be moving northeastward, and then another system will move into the northwest here early next week. So that is a big view of things. Let's take a closer look here at Tropical Storm Nadine. And the storm has made landfall and is weakening at the time. Pretty impressive outflow, though, low wind shear. And if this system had more time, it would be a what-if situation. What if it had done that? We would see a much more well-defined system. But despite what social media tried to show here a couple weeks ago with a few models going up into Florida, this is heading west and being protected by a massive area of high pressure in the eastern U.S. So it will track across Belize this afternoon into Guatemala tonight, then into southeastern portions of Mexico. And aircraft did fly into the storm before it made landfall, did find wind speeds up to 60 miles per hour on the northeastern side. This was at about 12:29 here Eastern. That storm, or the plane has left now that the system has moved onshore. So a moderately strong tropical storm here, and this is Belize City right here. So the center of the storm basically right over Belize City, but the strongest winds have come a little bit farther to the north, all the way up to the Mexican border close to Chetumal. So not a bad-looking, quick approaching storm system here, but you can see the aircraft did pick up flight level winds that indicated winds at the ground were close to 60 miles per hour before that landfall, even though the pressure was pretty high. So that system is going to weaken as it moves westward. You can see on radar here a nice twist with it here. This is Belize City right on the coast and a broad center here. It is not strengthening anymore now that it's moving over land and very disorganized, but you see these bands of rain continuing to spread inland. These are the ones that will produce some localized flooding. Here you can see on the relief map here, this is where the mountainous areas are. And as this system heads west and then drops west-southwest, it's going to go right into these mountains here tonight and tomorrow, producing locally a significant flood threat. So that landfall was made here right at noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central, and there were wind speeds sustained to 55 miles per hour in San Pedro here, just across the border from Belize in the Yucatan. So those strongest winds were not near the center in Belize City, but in fact, they were about 40 to 50 miles to the north. And the storm itself, if you look at the discussion here, actually has, look at the forecast advisory here. The tropical storm force winds extend 170 miles from the center to the north and northeast. Hence the reason that tropical storm warning goes all the way up the Mexican coastline here to basically Cancun. And yeah, definitely disorganized, but it made a rally here in the ninth inning and intensified quite a bit. Now it's going to be weakening as it crosses Belize this afternoon. And this may get back into the Pacific Ocean here in a few days. Rainfall is going to be significant here, locally up to 10 inches, maybe even 12 over the coastal section here of Quintana Roo. That includes Chetumal. It's south of Cancun, but Cozumel could see 6 to 8 inches of rain. Belize will see 4 to 6 inches. Northern Guatemala over into southeastern Mexico, including Chiapas and Tabasco, will see significant rain. But in the mountains of southern Veracruz and Oaxaca, we could see over a foot of rain, maybe as much as 15 inches. And even along the coastal range here in southern Guatemala and El Salvador, significant rain is also expected. You'll see the models, while the storm is probably going to crumble and fall apart over the mountains, it may regenerate here in a couple of days and track harmlessly off to sea here westward across the Pacific. And at that point, a good amount of our models indicate a rebirth here as our zombie comes back to life as a potential hurricane across the eastern Pacific Ocean, but it will not be threatening land at that point. Let's talk about Oscar, and it's not big, but boy, is it overachieving at this point. Whatever. You can see on the latest satellite, this thing is rapidly intensifying. Banding is very good, and a core is forming. These are the Turks and Caicos here. This is the center right here going right at these islands. And you will see, because the mountains here of the Dominican Republic are far enough south, the center is able to kind of avoid land, much like we saw with Milton here about not even 2 weeks ago. Sometimes these smaller systems can be very difficult because the models don't necessarily see what's going on because of how small they are. They kind of fly under the radar, but because they stay small, they have the opportunity to very quickly strengthen. And that's what I think is going on with this system. You can see here the wind shear is not very impressive, and because of this approaching trough, we are seeing a little bit more moisture than we had as it passed north of the islands a couple of days ago. So it's actually in a pretty favorable spot for a couple of days to really get itself going here. You can see we don't have radar out of the Turks and Caicos, but we can see the bands of heavy rain are getting ready to hit Cockburn Town here. And then Cockburn Harbor will get that later, and then Yankeetown and Conch Bar will tonight. This core of the storm should go just north here of of the southern Bahamas. I think this is great. Gosh, what's it called? I forgot. I'm sorry here. I don't have a great geography lesson on it. But what I am going to show you here is a little bit shocking. The aircraft made a penetration of the center here, and you can see the wind speeds just on the northwest side of the center are actually getting very close to hurricane force. And I'm going to go back and check what the Hurricane Center has to say about it. They haven't updated their website yet as of 1 o'clock. But take a look at this here. Flight level winds indicate that surface winds are very close to hurricane strength. We're seeing 70 knots at flight level, meaning we probably have 70 to maybe 75 mile per hour winds at the surface here. It's not a huge storm. It's very small, but it is very intense here and continuing to intensify. Now you can see here the track takes it westward here tonight, right across. I think it'll be a hurricane at this point if it's not already there now. Inagua, that's the island. I apologize. I know it's not very populated, but it seems like a cool place to go vacation. Maybe we'll do that later. But the storm is going to drop southward a little bit here and approach Cuba. And models from a few days ago continued to bring it across Cuba towards Jamaica, but the trough is looking like it's going to pick up a stronger system and allow it to turn more to the northeast here. And as a result, that's going to bring it across Crooked Island and Acklands here, probably early next week. It may come close to Long Island or Lung Island for those of you who are from there, and then very close to San Salvador, Rum Cay, and then it's going to head away. And at that point, wind shear should pick up, but the remains may approach Bermuda as we get to the middle of next week. Here's the ship's model from Oscar, and it keeps it a tropical storm. It does not show the rapid intensification that's actually been happening, so the model out the door is already doing poorly. But you'll see wind shear stays fairly low until the end of the weekend. Then it does come up. Our relative humidity is not very high, but it is increasing here, and the heat content is substantial enough for this system to maintain some intensity. Despite what everybody believes about wind shear, we have learned this system with storms that are beginning to grow, that wind shear has actually allowed them to have a place to ventilate on their northern side, and it doesn't necessarily mean the system falls apart right away. If anything, it actually prolongs and grows the system somewhat. Now, I think by the time we get to next Tuesday, the wind shear is going to be substantially higher, and our system will struggle at that point. But it's going to take some time. If it does get stronger than modeled here today and tonight, then as it comes into this zone here, it's going to be a little bit tougher to weaken. Here is the modeling, and you can see because we have a stronger system, it's unlikely to go in this direction. More than likely, it's making that hard right here through the central Bahamas. You can see Bermuda's over here. In about 5 days, the system is modeled to be close to it, but it could also be merging with a cold front at that point. The intensity forecast here is already junk at this point. As I showed you here, aircraft showing intensity is already up to here. So if it's going to intensify, it's probably going to be a Category 1, maybe a small chance it even tries to get to Category 2. And I know nobody's saying that right now, but just look at that aircraft data. It's hard to kind of argue with actual data. And you can see the Hurricane Center in their discussion from this morning says that Oscar's only got about a day to strengthen due to that low wind shear. So it is showing it getting to 50 miles per hour, but I think it's already stronger. Then after we get past Sunday, the wind shear increases out of the northwest pretty quickly. However, Oscar is a very small tropical cyclone and could be prone to rapid changes in intensity, both up and down. After 3 days, it'll be weakening quite a bit, probably very quickly. But in the shorter term, that intensity change could certainly overachieve here. For rainfall, despite the strength of the storm, I don't think this is a huge flooding event. It's moving fairly quickly, but eastern Cuba does have the risk of seeing half a foot of rain or over 100 millimeters of rain. The rest of the Bahamas here, at least the central and southeast Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, will see a few inches. But fortunately, this does not look like a flood threat for Jamaica, Haiti, or the Dominican Republic, and it's already passed you in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. I want to go back to the Hurricane Center and see what's going on here. I'm very curious, based on this aircraft data, what exactly is going on. So this is live here. Okay, here we go. Update statement. Oscar, 70 mile per hour wind, just like I showed you. The pressure down to 991. We are going to have a new advisory here at 2 o'clock Eastern time, and I suspect they're going to bump this up to a potential hurricane by 5 o'clock. We're probably going to see hurricane warnings in effect here in a small area near where the storm is expected to go. So the Turks and Caicos are probably going to be seeing a hurricane here this afternoon and tonight. I bet you did not see that one coming. I'll be honest, I didn't either. I thought maybe tropical storm, but this season continues to amaze me. This is quite the show that we're seeing here. So we can take a look at tropical models, but they're already doing poorly here. You will see that the wind field here is not expected to grow, but you can see even the HWRF model showing eventual intensification on Monday here in a small area, and it's already going to be too weak, in my opinion, here. By the time we get past Tuesday morning, you'll see the system is going to merge with a front. Here it comes here. The wind shear picks up, but here's Bermuda on Wednesday evening. And we could see some strong winds in Bermuda, especially if this core here ends up over here instead. So if you're in Bermuda, just something you want to keep an eye on. It will not be a strong hurricane, but it could be a tropical storm or a subtropical or post-tropical storm moving into the area here Wednesday and Wednesday night. So let's take a quick look at what's going on past these two systems. Again, you can see Nadine on the icon here. May try to reorganize by Tuesday morning, well southwest of Acapulco. The icon model is the only one that's actually showing Oscar on the map. Every other model right now just kind of whiffs at it. But you can see here, it's still going to have a circulation until the dry air and shear hits it on Wednesday morning. And then the icon has it going just east of Bermuda Wednesday afternoon, and then merging with a front. And you'll see the pressure drop at that point, but it will no longer be tropical. After that, we may not be finished in the Caribbean, as things could get more active once again. I showed this to you all, but if you're joining me for the first time this week, I do want to show it to you again. Brown indicates sinking air. Green indicates rising air, which green is favorable for tropical development. Brown is unfavorable. Despite all of that, we have two storms here in somewhat unfavorable environments here. So we've seen overachievement. As we get to next week, the sinking air begins to let up a little bit. We're not there yet, but as we get later on into this, and I want to show you here the 0Z run, we get to a more favorable pattern here in the Western Caribbean again towards the week of the 28th. We actually see what's called the Madden-Julian oscillation come around to where the sinking air goes onto the Pacific side and the rising air comes into the Atlantic and Caribbean side. And so if you look at this, it doesn't tell you how strong a storm may be, how many storms we're going to have. All it does is show us that the environment is going to be more favorable for tropical development as we even get into the first week of the month of November. We can look at ensembles here. This is Nadine. This is Oscar over here, both very small. But as we move on into time, what's left of Nadine is in the Pacific by Tuesday and Wednesday. The Southern Caribbean's not too busy at this point. And then we have two different solutions here. One taking the system Oscar near Bermuda here Wednesday afternoon, but some model ensembles keeping it farther south and slower here until Thursday. After that, we are going to start to see some solutions, again indicating that maybe at the end of this month, we've got to again keep our eyes on the Western Caribbean. And only one or two members here showing something developing that quickly, but over more time, you can see things are definitely starting to cook again here over the Central and Western Caribbean by the time we get 2 weeks beyond today to about the 2nd and 3rd of November. So obviously, I don't know what all is going to play out at this point. We can look at the GFS 2-week forecast and try to draw a conclusion from it, but it will end up being wrong. And I'm not going to show that to you because I don't want to mislead folks. But this definitely indicates more action here in November as our very busy season continues past a lot of folks' expectations this late in the season. So as always, I'm going to keep you all posted. I'll be back here tomorrow afternoon, but I will have some updates on Oscar as that evolves here over the next 24 hours. I appreciate everybody's time. I hope you all have a safe weekend. I hope you get to enjoy the weather in the eastern U.S. here, even though we do need some rain. But enjoy it while we can. Great weather for cleanup from the storms here, and we need all of that we can get at this point. As always, I thank you for your time. I encourage you to become a subscriber, and I want to encourage you as well with a word of God. As a Christian man, I give God all the honor, all the glory. He has allowed me to do this. This is my assignment and my gift. And I know a lot of people don't want to share their faith publicly, but I believe that that's my calling. It's to do that. Paul tells the Church of Rome, Romans 10:16-18, NIV, for Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our message? Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. But I ask, did they not hear? Of course they did. Their voice has gone out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. I think a lot of people lose their faith at different points in their life when they hit struggles, when people burn them, when they get church hurt, whatever happens. But here's the good news. We serve a loving God, and that faith comes from hearing the message. And the word of God is what needs to be preached, because the more and more you hear the message, the more and more believable it ends up being. For 30 years of my life, I chose not to listen to the message. I made the choice not to have faith, not to have a religion, to be atheist. But I heard more and more of the word, and more things changed in my life to where I realized, you know what? Maybe this isn't too good to be true. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be. There are reasons for everything. And I wanted to share that with you today because that drives me to do what I do every day. It is encouraging, and I realize that there are folks that are tuning in here that do disagree. And look, I don't disrespect you because I was there, but I just want you to hear the word anyway because I truly believe it matters, and I believe it makes a difference. And it's hard to follow a religion not seeing things happen. It's hard to have faith, right? But what is awesome is that when God sends his son to die on the cross and can come back to life and absolve us of our sins, that we can truly repent, because that is something I could get behind. So I wanted to share that good news with you all today, and I hope everybody's got a great Saturday planned. I'll be back on here briefly tomorrow. Have a blessed day. See ya.